just need y'all prayers. I need y'all to... I don't even know what to say.
Remember Big U? He turned himself into federal custody last month after a shocking indictment alleged he committed a number of crimes, from embezzlement to fraud to extortion to robbery, as well as violating the federal RICO Act. But that's not all. His indictment comes as such a shock because to the public, he appeared like an OG who just wanted to do good. But according to the feds, that was all a ploy. I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Now, if Big U is convicted on his charges, he's not facing light time. He's facing life in prison. Now, last time I reported on this story, we had little info about the man he's accused of murdering beyond that he was an aspiring rap artist signed to his label. Now we've learned the victim we previously knew as RW actually used to play football with Big U's son.
I just want y'all to know, all this stuff is quagmire. Shit is all bullcrap.
Not guilty. That's the plea Big U entered last week when he was arraigned on his charges. But Big U is looking at a major uphill battle, and the battle of a federal trial could soon begin as early as next month. According to his federal indictment, Big U ran a criminal enterprise that they call the Big U Enterprise. Court documents say the Big U Enterprise is a mafia-like organization that utilizes Henley's stature and long-standing association with the Rollin' 60s and other street gangs to intimidate businesses and individuals in Los Angeles. Federal prosecutors claim Big U is known and regarded as a leader within the Rollin' 60s Crips, and his time with the gang dates all the way back to the 80s, where he rose up the ranks after earning his rep as an enforcer. So what do the feds have on him? According to the indictment, agents have confidential human sources, wiretaps, search warrants for social media, iCloud, Google accounts, financial records from individuals and companies or organizations, toll records showing communications between conspirators, victims, and Big U Enterprise members and associates, cell phone records, records from the city of Los Angeles, interviews from witnesses and victims. Now, essentially, they claim to have a lot on him, especially since the investigation launched in 2021. But here's what else we've learned since the last reporting of this story. So in addition to embezzlement, wire fraud, and all that, Big U was accused of murdering one of his rap artists in a Vegas desert in January of 2021. Now, previously, we only knew the victim as RW because that's what the indictment says. But now we know the victim's name, Rayshawn Williams. Now, prior to him being a rapper, he was a football player for Crenshaw High. The team even posting a remembrance to him on their Instagram page, writing in part, quote, "He was a very special guy to all of us here at Crenshaw. We hope that you pray and continue to pray for the family and hope that everything goes well along with them." But it's how Rayshawn died that's horrifying. Now, according to the indictment, Big U allegedly murdered Rayshawn by shooting him multiple times, then dragging his body into the desert and left him there in a ditch not far from Interstate 15. A witness told investigators Big U was one of the last people seen with Rayshawn before his murder. But why would he kill his own artist? Well, allegedly, Rayshawn recorded a diss track about Big U, even seemingly foreshadowing his own death. Now, the indictment says, quote, RW was dissing Henley, referring to Henley as the bro that makes some money, and that RW may get shot in the face for thinking his lackadaisical use of the studio and general representation of unique music is funny. Now, just 5 days later, after laying that track down, Rayshawn was shot in the face with a revolver that left no shell casings. But it's unclear if Big U heard the lyrics prior to the murder. But according to the internet gossip and rumors that are swirling around, others have suggested other reasons for why Rayshawn was murdered, like Wack 100 alleging Rayshawn and Big U's son were in a relationship and Big U didn't like that. Now, nowhere in the indictment does it claim that happened, but Wack 100 and Big U hate each other, so who knows, it might be Wack trying to get another jab in. But in addition to murder, federal prosecutors allege Big U's enterprise purported control of LA, to the point Big U allegedly required musicians, athletes, and others who wanted to do business in LA, both legitimate and even of the criminal kind, to check in. Now, if you're unfamiliar with checking in, it's pretty much you had to get permission from Big U to travel to LA if you wanted protection. Ironic enough, his podcast is called Checkin' In. He even made note of how to do it in the theme song. When you hop off a plane, check in. Penthouse suite, check in. When your feet hit the street, check in. Because if not, gets hot. You better check in. And checking in isn't just sending a text message to Big U saying, hey, I'm in Los Angeles. You gotta pay him. And he's gotta sign off on it if you want to conduct certain activities. Now, Big U has pretty much been a guest on every hip-hop and rap podcast you can imagine, and the feds were watching. Now, they cited in the Hip Hop Uncovered documentary that Big U stated, if you don't pick up the phone, that can mean death for somebody. In the Nothing to Something podcast, he said, "You gonna check in. You could choose not to, and it's gonna be a problem. If you choose not to check in, you suffer the consequences." Now, an example they used of the so-called consequences was the attempted murder for hire plot of rapper Quando Rondo, which was allegedly set in motion by rapper Lil Durk. Now, during that shooting, Quando Rondo wasn't killed, but his cousin was gunned down. Then there's the whole defrauding companies, donors, athletes, and celebrities part. Big U is accused of pocketing more than $100,000 in donations to Developing Options, his nonprofit charity. He even received donations from the likes of Draymond Green and Shaq. Now, according to the LA Times, in August of 2019, NBA star Draymond Green donated $20,000 to the nonprofit. Shaq donated the same amount, but the money went into Big U's personal account. So that's a lot, right? And that's just the cliff notes, pretty much. Now, I just want to point out here, obviously the feds are accusing Big U of violating RICO, so they allege he didn't do it alone. There were several others also picked up, and by picked up, I mean arrested as a part of the alleged criminal enterprise. Now, as for Big U, he claims that he's innocent. On the way to turn himself in, this is what he had to say.
I'm looking at this video as I come in to turn myself in, and I'm disheartened by the fact that they trying to say that I stole something from Developing Option, or I used Developing Option as a front. Developing Option paid my bills. They paid my house note. They paid the bills for my family, the money I made as an employee for Developing Option. I never mixed that with nothing. I didn't manipulate nobody. I didn't steal nothing. We did PPP loans. We did 2 loans. And that's it, just like everybody else did. I didn't use no fraud. I didn't give none of fake names. And one of them we was paying back and one they forgave. You know what I mean? And the other one we attempted for and they didn't give us nothing for it. I filed my taxes and them coming around telling me I was using Developing Option as a cover. Cover for what? None of that's going to be true. None of that's going to be true. The government putting this big picture, they going to arrest 21 dudes. Some dudes I don't even talk to. I don't even know nothing about. So how the hell you going to lump me in with all them? But it's all the big picture, though. It's all the big picture. Now I'm going to be sitting in here. It's going to be years out of my life. Then you going to get dudes who I don't even talk to. What they going to say? You ruining people's lives. I heard it's up with 21 people that's been arrested. This shit wrong. It is what it is. Church, just pray for me. Just pray for me, pray for my family. And you look at what we did. You look at what I did. I've been home 21 years. It ain't over, though. That's what it's not. Blessings. I'm looking at all these charges on the news. I'm headed back to LA. And then I'm looking at the people they arrested. How you gonna go arrest people that I don't even talk to? That's a built-in liar right there. You know what I mean? So, is that how they gonna work the case? Everybody know I don't can. Everybody know I'm big. So if you want to arrest certain dudes, and put them next to me, them is the dudes you gonna have to call themselves turning against me. Well, ain't no turn against me. I ain't going for that. You might as well go get 600 and Wack. These dudes been saying I did all year. So what they doing is they go on the internet and these dudes say that I did shit on the internet. Then when you say I did on the internet, they go investigate it. Now you raiding my houses, raiding my shops, raiding all this stuff, and talking about I'm committing crimes and covering up with Developing Option. What crimes am I committing to cover up with Developing Option? You know what I'm saying? I ain't committed no crimes and covered nothing up with Developing Option. It's crazy. But this how they get you. They get 1 or 2 people to say something. Ain't gonna be no real evidence. Ain't gonna be no real nothing. It's gonna be a repeated thug. It's gonna be a bunch of people in jail for a bunch of different crimes that don't have nothing to do with me. They finna lump all of us up and say it's all around the 60s. Watch this. We just seen it with thug. I'm finna experience the same thing out here. I knew it was coming. Now they on there saying all this stuff to assassinate my character. All right, man, just pray for me. And again, they can do any one of us. It ain't nobody safe with these dudes. If these dudes feel they want you, how they going around talking about somebody's gonna raid my house before my house get raided? How they there with the police? And y'all sitting there following them. Everybody that's a part of them shows, and 100 shows and all them shows, and y'all need to, everybody who following them, promoting them, anything. Y'all wrong. Y'all ain't black. And y'all show ain't for our people. They can put charges against anybody. So this is gonna probably be my last video. I'm gonna go turn myself in to see what's going on. They talking about I'm a fugitive. So they just raided all my houses. 600 was actually with the police when they raided my house. And he's actually got video and footage of it. So y'all know what y'all dealing with. And I just want to say this to y'all. When they raided my houses and my property, they was asking about Wack. Wack, loose cannon, 600, and this internet stuff. All of y'all filed. All y'all who be sending shit around the internet, all y'all who be promoting and listening to what these niggas saying, all y'all giving these likes and hidden likes, all y'all supporting this. All y'all guilty of this. If you had something against a black man, you should handle it with a black man in the streets. Wack said 100 times he was gonna take my contracts. He working with the FBI. The FBI went to the city 3 days in a row and told the city they didn't want nobody to give me no more money. They went to all the different celebrities and told all the different celebrities, don't give me no money, don't help me, don't do nothing for me. They going around scaring and intimidating everybody. But y'all sitting it around getting people in trouble. Like y'all don't understand what the FBI do to black men who try to help their community. I ain't been nothing but a help to our community. But I guess it is what it is. This the price of being black and trying to help somebody, trying to help your community and do what you can. You just guilty because somebody else don't like you and then go on the internet and do what they want to and y'all gonna promote it. It's crazy. But I'm going to go turn myself in though. Because I ain't did nothing. This fact is, man, they done went to my house, kicked my houses in, bust my doors down, bust my windows. They calling my son at his football practice, threatening him. You know what I mean? These dudes tagging him. What kind of shit is this? But y'all gonna be rolling with these dudes. And I got this last thing to say. Wack said he was gonna destroy developing option, right? So who gonna replace developing option? Which one of you 60s gonna call yourself coming in? Because whoever try to come in, y'all the ones that's working with Wack. Believe that. So remove me to get me out the way for somebody else to come in who gonna cooperate. That's what the play is. That's what the whole play is. I'm out. I'm gonna send y'all videos to put up, all of them until they lock me up.
And we'll see how this plays out, as new reports suggest he could face trial as early as next month. Let's bring on trial attorney Adante Pointer to get his take on what Big U's trial could look like. Adante, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, before we get into the trial aspect of everything, what's actually your reaction to Big U's 107-page indictment? In it, there's so many allegations like violation of RICO Act, allegations of embezzling, allegations of murder, and that federal authorities actually date back some of these alleged crimes as early as 2021.
Yes. This is a very much a sprawling indictment that has ensnared not only Big U, but it implicates a lot of different people because the government essentially laid out their case to say this was not a single individual, although he was the head or the mastermind, if you leave it to what the government has put together, of this criminal enterprise. And in order for it to be an enterprise, that means there are other people involved. And so this is a net that has ensnared more than just Big U, but it's also implications for a lot of other people on a far-ranging list of crimes And, this is something that was pretty shocking to read. It almost read as if it was a fiction novel. But from the government's position, this is fact, not fiction.
Oh, yeah. And it does feel like it's a movie script just kind of playing out. And it's interesting, too, because the persona Big U kind of portrayed was that of a former OG that's now a community activist. He wants to do good for the community. And while we can say two things can be true at once, right? Like maybe he was doing good for the community, but if you believe what the federal authorities are alleging, especially in this indictment, he was running pretty much essentially a mafia-like enterprise. They even said that in the indictment. What's your reaction to kind of what feels like a double life he was living?
Well, you mentioned that two things can be right. And so he could have also been engaged in things that were positive, if you will, for the community in terms of helping a community that's very disadvantaged and hasn't received the same economic opportunities. Nevertheless, you have to counterbalance that with these allegations right now that show that he was involved in not just trafficking and extorting people, but also they say that he personally committed a murder. So, those are very stark contrasts and contradictions of a person. And I'm sure the community knows him one way or maybe both ways. That's what's going to be pretty riveting, is to see if this case makes it to trial and or more information that comes out as relates to where the government got their information from. We may see two contradictions of a man on full display, or we may see that this is really the monster as he's been portrayed, or as Big U has tried to portray himself, a victim of government overreach.
And what are your thoughts on Big U kind of declaring his innocence? Now, before he had turned himself in to federal authorities, initially people thought he was going to make a run for it, but he turned himself in. We know that, and he's been in custody for weeks at this point. But in terms of just what federal authorities have on him, but Big U's kind of declaring that, to your point, this is overreach. What's your reaction to that?
Well, when you're up against a federal indictment and one of the cornerstones and the bedrocks of our democracy is innocent until proven guilty, I think that he played it the way that you could, which is he's saying, hey, I didn't do all of these things that you're claiming. I'm not this monster that you're portraying me to be. And I'm looking forward essentially to defending myself against these allegations. That in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that I didn't do anything that's being alleged or that I wasn't some part or piece of the entire mosaic or picture that they're painting. He's just simply saying, look, I didn't do all that you said I did. This isn't the way it went down. And I look forward to saying my piece. And you're targeting me. And that same allegation rings very similar to what we heard with our current president, who was the target, if you will, of federal activity in the courts and prosecutors. And he wound up his way in the White House in the Oval Office.
Yeah, that is very correct. As far as the allegations in Big U's indictment, when it comes to wire fraud allegations, embezzlement, making fraudulent applications for COVID-19 relief loans, and then you have that on top of some of the more kind of heinous allegations too, that being murder, allegations of robbery, kidnapping, all of that sort. Why do you think that they're all kind of stacked together in this massive indictment, as opposed to, for example, the murder happened back in 2021? Why do you think that wasn't taken up as a separate matter, and then possibly the financial stuff taken up in another matter? Why do you think it's all together? It's so that way federal authorities can kind of get a slam dunk and a win, or what are your thoughts on that?
Typically, when you see the federal authorities or any prosecutor kind of lumped together an assortment of crimes that range over an extended period of time, what they're looking at is the cumulative effect of the weight. When Big U were to step into a trial and or try to negotiate a plea bargain on this case, the prosecutor has 5, 10, 15 different criminal acts and violations to choose from to kind of to put him in a rock and a hard place, so to speak. And so what you see is they pile on, is the term that the criminal defense attorneys use. We say, you've piled on all these charges in order to make it that much more difficult for my client to fight for his freedom, and or if we were to go to trial, you paint such a negative picture by claiming all these different things. A jury is more likely to think, well, maybe not all of these things are true, but one of these things are true. And we might not agree on the most severe crime, but we can make a compromise verdict in terms of a jury agreeing on a charge or a conviction on something that's a little bit less serious, but yet carries devastating consequences in terms of prison time.
Yeah, because he's facing life in prison, and not even just life in prison, a statutory max sentence of life in prison. What are your thoughts on whether or not this could be a possibility for him, especially given that, he had previously served time for a completely different separate matter. But in terms of just the punishment that he's facing, it is a lot of time. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Federal charges and convictions come with heavy penalties. That's why the weight of the federal government, when it's leaning on you as a criminal defendant, or if you're the criminal defense attorney, is punishing. Because especially for people who have prior convictions, you have the risk of being declared a career criminal, which in and of itself invokes a mandatory minimum of decades of time. And that's how the federal system works. It's a point system as it relates for how a punishment could be meted out. So when he has all these different variety of crimes, you add that to his prior convictions, and you're looking at a staggering amount of time as it relates to prison exposure. And that's why many people plead, because you're up against a very difficult decision. Do I risk what might be hundreds of years in prison, or do I take 10, 15, 20 years, which is still an amazing amount of time, but you still have an opportunity to come home and restart your life, versus 300 years, which is essentially a death sentence.
Yeah, and that's why I'm kind of surprised that given this overwhelming amount of evidence, it seems like from federal prosecutors and from authorities, that I was a little surprised that Big U pleaded not guilty. Now, again, he maintains his innocence in all of this, but as in terms of him not going through with the plea, in this case, now going to trial, what's your reaction? What do you think it could look like?
Well, he's going to have amount of time to review the federal government's evidence against him and try to challenge it, and then mount his own defense. At some point in time, as you mentioned, he will have to make the decision. Am I going to try to make a deal or accept an offer, or will I have to go to trial? Those are going to be heavy concerns and considerations for him to think through, because as we discussed, he's looking at an inordinate amount of time, and the federal government will give you that time. There's no question. So this will be a very difficult decision. And I think primarily it'll weigh upon the witnesses coming to court and cooperating. But that's actually a very common tactic of the federal government, is when you're facing a federal prosecution, oftentimes they already have the witnesses against you in the bag, so to speak, and they're cooperating, and they have sentences, and they have statements and interviews and recorded evidence. So oftentimes when you see a federal indictment, the federal government has already done the research, they've already done their homework. But that doesn't mean people do not beat these charges. That certainly can happen. So it's to be determined, as they say.
And as far as the murder allegation, he's accused of murdering a rapper that was signed to his label. And the feds pretty much allege that he did this because this rapper, who we now know to be Rayshawn Williams, recorded a diss track about Big U. Now, it's unclear whether or not Big U actually heard these lyrics prior to the shooting. But in terms of just the murder the murder allegation. What are your thoughts on this, especially given kind of the close nature that Big U allegedly had with the victim?
Once again, to read that allegation and to hear that he murdered a rapper that worked for him, that was on his recording label, that he actually was supposed to be looking out for and kind of shepherding through the entertainment industry, shot him allegedly in the face and left him for dead on the side of a highway, all because this rapper made a diss track or disrespected him in a song. Those are very shocking allegations and, heinous if proved true. And, it's something that you'd hate to hear happen to anyone. But over something as petty as a diss track is something that's just unimaginable to think about, the depravity of a person to do such a thing. So it's definitely a jaw-dropping headline. The question is it true? And what is the evidence to back it up? And so that remains to be seen.
Yeah, and in terms of even just that, you also have this kind of other aspect to the entire case, and that's Big U's kind of way of raining this power down on LA, and that's in the form of checking in. Something that really federal authorities kind of laid out how Big U kind of operates that in terms of just even having professional athletes, musicians, other people who wanted to come down to LA pretty much make a form of payment to make sure that they were protected essentially by Big U, so that way consequences wouldn't happen. And the feds even kind of point out what the consequences are, that being the shooting or the attempted murder of rapper Quando Rondo, and that kind of has to deal with the Lil Durk case. But in terms of just the whole checking in aspect to this case and just even the power that Big U exuded, because they got the whole check-in thing, and I could just kind of ramble on about this, but they got the whole check-in thing because Big U always talked about it on podcasts and documentaries. He was very vocal, and it seems like the feds were watching this entire time. But in terms of just the evidence that the federal authorities have as far as the podcasts, the documentaries that he had done, but in addition to Big U saying these kind of words out of his own mouth, how bad does that look for the defense come trial?
Well, when you are facing criminal charges and some of the key items or pieces of evidence are words you yourself have uttered out of your mouth, they're very hard to walk back. They're very hard to dodge the implications of those. And so many of these rappers and people in the entertainment industry have gotten very fond of getting on social media and on podcasts and telling stories or recording themselves in the midst of whatever they're doing, essentially admitting to what they're doing and describing what they're doing, which to me is essentially saying, hey, raising your hand and saying, hey, I'm ready to go to jail or I'm ready to go to prison. Take me in. And so, unfortunately, for Big U, they're citing a lot of these different interviews or internet posts where he's talking about checking in. I do note that, and keep in mind, I imagine a part of his defense, I would think, is going to say, look, given where people want to film these videos or they want to come and do their marketing or their advertisements and shoot these videos, these are in dangerous parts of LA. And the police are not here protecting people. The police come after a crime takes place. Many people in these communities say the police come to pick up the shells or to pick up the bodies. They're not there before the shooting takes place or the protection before, the carnage happens. And so Big U's like, hey, I'm providing a service. These rappers, these entertainers want to come to these dangerous neighborhoods and take pictures and take videos. I'm actually there making sure that bad things don't happen. I'm providing order that the police are not providing. Now, that's very much like the Godfather Don Corleone-esque. So I don't know how to actually play in a courtroom, but I think many people in the community and in the industry understood it. Unless he was actively going after people saying, hey, if you didn't check in, now I have to come and rob you. And that is a part of the allegations in the federal indictment, is that it wasn't just he was providing protection in places and in ways that the police were unable to. It was that the allegation is that if he understood that a celebrity was coming to LA and they did not check in, did not pay the tax, if you will, for his protection, then he would actively send people after them in order to rob them, in order to further cement his reputation as the boss, if you will, in these neighborhoods.
And it's interesting too, because, given street code, right? Not that I'm too familiar with it, but from my understanding of it, it just seems like there is just kind of this code of honor in a way. That is just kind of the way that the streets run. And even in terms of Big U talking about checking in, he says, even when he leaves LA, he makes it a point to check in if he's going to Chicago, if he's going to Atlanta. So it seems like there's kind of this, if you do this for me, I do this for you type of code of honor in a way for this in the streets. But in terms of just leaving the street life, because sometimes when you're caught too in deep, it seems like there's no way of getting out, and then this type of thing happens. But in terms of just, the OG's not leaving the street life. We're in 2025 now. A lot of things have changed in terms of, people are more vocal on podcasts or more vocal on social media, just about things that they may not realize could be coming off very criminal, but they're still talking about it, not realizing that other people are watching. But in terms of just the street life bleeding into criminal activity that just keeps going and going and going, what are your thoughts about that overall?
Yeah, he certainly has a past that's been discussed, had some convictions, known to be a power player or the boss within his circle and within his circle of influence there in Los Angeles. And yes, people do check in when they go into different parts of our country. Now, is it a check-in to say, hey, I'm here, look out for me, tell me the best restaurants, tell me the best places to hang out, tell me the places to avoid? That's a certain type of check-in. And those are the type of things that many of us might do if we're going to a place that we're not familiar with, and we have people who are familiar with that place in our circle. The problem that, people run into is when you provide those type of recommendations or services, A, for money, and B, under pain of being robbed or beaten or killed. Okay, that's called extortion. That's different than merely, checking a Yelp review. All right, and so that's what the federal government is talking about here. I do once again understand and appreciate the idea that these people often are high net worth individuals. They live a flashy lifestyle. They're going into areas where violence and crime definitely takes place. The police don't appear to be able to maintain that order, and there's something to be said about communities being organized in a way to where someone outside of the system who may not be able to, the system in areas that the system may not be able to reach, is able to maintain some sense of order and decorum about how things are going to take place in these communities. And so that may be the role Big U played. And if that's the case, then we also understand from just watching politics and just our everyday things is that when the person who is maintaining that order is removed, there is a power struggle at times, and there's a power vacuum, and then people are competing to fill that void. And oftentimes that leads to even more violence than the authorities think that they were trying to stem or quell. Instead, it incites violence and aggressive activity. And so that also remains to be seen.
There have been some reports that have been suggesting that the trial could start as early as next month, which to me sounds just completely insane. But do you think that's actually plausible given just how extensive this case really is? Do you see it even going on trial next month or getting pushed back, especially now that he's in custody?
I was a bit surprised to say this case is scheduled for trial in such a short window of time. However, I also understand that as a defense attorney and as a defense strategy, sometimes you want to push the government or the prosecutor to trial quickly because you do not believe that they have all their ducks in a row and will be able to essentially be organized, be prepared, and ready to bring all the witnesses and the evidence to bear at trial against you. And so that's also sometimes a tactic. At the same time, generally speaking, time is in the defendant's favor if they allow time to kind of run out and allow time to extend out, because witnesses' memories fade, bad things happens to people. People, are not easily found, and a case can fall apart over time. And so, as usually, that's to the defendant's benefit to allow the time to kind of run out and not ask or push for a quick trial. But just because the trial is scheduled for within a month's time or so does not mean it will go at that time. Oftentimes trials are delayed. They're continued to later dates for reasons on both sides of the aisle. Sometimes the prosecutor needs more time. Other times the defense needs more time, or even the court. So I wouldn't bet on trial proceeding in a month or so. However, it could happen at some later point in time if neither the defendant and the prosecutors can agree on some type of deal.
And how much of a hurdle do you think the defense is looking at, even though the prosecution has the burden of proof, but in terms of just what they have versus the defense, do you think they're really looking at an uphill battle here?
Well, assessing how difficult of a row it is for the prosecution to hoe is only going to be able to really be assessed once you see the evidence behind the allegations, and whether or not people who provided evidence to the federal government are actually going to come to court and say the same things. People oftentimes, and we've seen this in Young Thug's case down in Atlanta, where who the prosecutors thought were a star witness, that person came to court and made a mockery of the entire process, to where Young Thug, who was facing hundreds of years of time, at minimum decades of time in prison, he's at home on his couch on probation. So, these are different. The outcomes are not certain, nor is conviction fixed. Things can happen, and, we have to wait with bated breath to see how this all plays out.
Right, because I remember very clearly when everything, and I'm pretty sure I know which witness you're talking about, where it just kind of felt like we were in the longest trial ever. It just all went from downhill. So you really never know when it comes to trials what the outcome could actually be. Adante Pointer, I want to thank you so much for your insight into this case. I really appreciate your time. If you had a crystal ball, what do you think Big U is looking at in terms of a conviction? Do you see a jury saying not guilty? Do you see a jury saying guilty on all counts? If you had possibly a crystal ball, what do you think we're looking at?
Well, I don't see a guilty on all counts. Oftentimes these charges, they vary in terms of their strength. What I can see, though, is given how the federal government works and the system and the weight and the awe, if you will, of when you read that, when you read the criminal complaint or the indictment and it says the United States government versus one individual, it really does mean that. So convictions are done at a very high rate in federal criminal cases. So I could see a conviction. The question that I can't kind of make out, and the answer that I can't make out of my crystal ball is which conviction he'll go down on.
And I guess it'll be a wait and see game to see how this all continues to unfold. Again, Adante Pointer, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your insight into this case.
Thank you for having me. Love being here. Take care.
Online record show Big U is still in federal custody at MDC Los Angeles. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.